Welcome back, everybody, and welcome back, Mr. George G., the wonderful, one-of-a-kind big band, swing band leader. So, for those of you joining us here, um, I'm Jeremy Sutton speaking from San Francisco. We have George G. in Queens, Astoria, Queens, New York City. So welcome back. This is part 2 of the portrait conversation. So I am going to start a brand new portrait today. I have absolutely no idea what it's going to look like, but you will see it unfold as I paint. And please be aware that when I look down or sideways as George is talking, it's only because I'm painting him, and George, not because of any fact that I'm being distracted or not interested in your
Of course.
amazing story.
Jeremy, I didn't realize we're starting a new portrait today because I thought it
Oh,
was just a continuation of the portrait from last week.
no, I always
We're
like to,
actually going to be another portrait?
yeah, it's going to have a totally different character.
Wow.
Who knows what's going to
I'm
happen?
so I'm
Maybe
so
there'll be
flattered.
some New York in this one because, New York is so much part of who you are. Um,
Of course.
so actually, just to give a little intro here, so the song you just heard um, playing was Lindy Hopper's Delight. That was being played by the George G. Orchestra, and it's actually from their brand new CD, Swing Makes You Happy, George's motto, as you already have gathered from last week.
Right.
Um,
Relatively new. It was actually recorded and released 5 years ago, but I guess in the whole scheme of thing, it is our most latest recording for sure.
yeah.
Lindy
So
Hopper's Delight.
Yeah, so last week we sort of talked about your, upbringing and your time in Pittsburgh, how you started your big band. And before we dive into sort of the transition back to New York, which is a fascinating part of your history, and also obviously your incredible and hugely important relationship with the Lindy Hop community and the New York dance scene, I thought let's take a step back to think about your job as a band leader. And you shared with me a fascinating 2-minute video from the Travel Channel called Cool Jobs. And surely, if
Cool.
anybody has a cool job, it's you, Mr. G. So, what I'd like to do is let's share that video with everybody and then let's chat about what exactly does a band leader do.
New York City is the capital of the world. In this particular case, it's the big band swing capital of the world. Hello, I'm George G., leader of the George G. Swing Orchestra. We are here at Swing 46 Jazz and Supper Club. Big band music is a true American art form. It's usually an ensemble of at least 10 to 17 musicians, and usually with a fantastic singer up front. To be a big band leader, you need to have a warm persona on stage so you can connect with the musicians and the audience. I'm really inspired by band leaders such as Cab Calloway, whose manic persona defines his total control on stage. Then there are band leaders such as the great Count Basie, who is the total opposite, where his mellow band leading belies the fact that he is in absolute musical control on the bandstand. I like to be in control, but at the same time, I like to be nice and loose.
Now here's another one of those great Count Basie numbers that's got a little bit of a boogie-woogie feel to it.
Big band music and swing dancing is a social act. It's a social interaction. It involves cocktails. Families and lives start in a ballroom. It's a blessing to be able to do this day in and day out. Big band music is happy music. And honestly, in this time and age, a little joy and happy music is just what we need. You know what they say? Swing makes you happy.
Well,
All
there it says
right.
it. One of the coolest jobs in New York City, probably one of the coolest jobs in the world. And, you know, sometimes have you ever had anybody ask, you know, what does George do? So as a band leader, and without any disrespect, by the way, but it is
Of course
interesting
not. None
because,
taken.
right, because you're not playing an instrument in the band, even though you are a bassist. So let's talk a bit about, you know, what does a band leader do?
Uh, I will do so. You know, because I do get asked that question numerously over the course of my career so far. What does George do up on stage? And mind you, Jeremy, I have to admit that my time on stage with my musicians and the audience and the band is always my escape from reality. I mean, that is my time, and I really treasure that time. I look forward to being on stage, especially at a club or a festival or a concert or a private party. And as I mentioned in that video of Cool Jobs that was originally broadcast on the Travel Channel, that's a big piece that I'm very proud of. I have I'm the king of multitasking on stage, Jeremy.
Hmm.
Mind you that I don't need a band with an instrument, nor do I sing because really no one wants to hear me sing. But it's not necessary. But I do have my main responsibility is to make sure that the canvas that I am part of is in, like in your instance, I guess I'm using that uh,
Hmm.
as a metaphor for what you're doing, is that you have control over that canvas and you're doing your best to make sure that the creativity um, and the entertainment of value, because mind you, we can never forget that big band music is entertainment. Um, and it's entertainment um, for the audience, but it's also entertainment for myself and my band members because we all enjoy the aspect of coming together to play in music, specifically in this instance, big band jazz. So as a band leader, I always make sure there's a really good connection between the audience, need they be diners or theater goers or swing dancers, and the musicians are in tune with each other and they are feeding off each other and they're
Mm.
building a climax from, in this instance, per song, from beginning to end, and to make sure that that intensity keeps at a nice even a nice steady pace all night long. And that intensity is not just for hot numbers, but it can be for uh, sweet numbers or tempos of various BPMs. So,
Mhm.
as a band leader, especially at a show at Swing 46, you asked me in the past whether
Yeah.
when I'm at Swing 46 specifically, do I have a set list? Do I have a preconceived program of music to perform, specifically dance music in this instance? And the answer is absolutely not. I never, I very rarely go into a situation with my swing orchestra where I know what I want to play. I may, or I may have certain tunes that I have in mind that I would like to play that night to feature certain soloists, to feature certain moods, or to feature or tunes that I haven't played recently to keep everybody interested. But I never know what I'm gonna play when I'm gonna play because it's always about the moment. I mean, sometimes when I start off at Swing 46 at 8:30, there may be 8 people in the room. But then by half an hour later at 9 o'clock, the room may have 50 people, and then an hour later they might have 150 people. So I would like to play for the audience.
Mhm.
Sometimes they're not dancers. Sometimes they're big band music lovers that like to sit on their rusty dusty and just enjoy the jive. So I want to make sure that whatever song that I play is good for that moment, and it's also based on multiple factors. Who took the last trumpet solo? Who has the upcoming rhythm section feature? Who's singing? Is John Dokes coming up to sing a couple tunes? Is it his turn in the program? So there's a lot of factors that I'm trying to have it swirling in my little egghead as a band leader. What's playing next? What did I play 2 songs ago? So I guess in a short turn, I have a lot of things to do, and I try not to show that I'm doing it because I really believe in the art of subtleness on stage, belying my frantic persona that I have on the stage. It's sort of a balancing act that I keep, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Right, right. And you have a wonderful, in the most lovely way, goofiness. You make people smile. No, it's true. You make people laugh, and you make, of course, as any master of their craft, which you absolutely are. You make everything seem so easy and seamless. But so here's one thing I wondered about. So you're reacting to the moment. You're looking out. Some dancers have come on or to the floor, and so you turn around to your band. Now, your band members don't know yet what the next song is going to be. So
Hmm.
so you shout out like a name of a song, a number in the book, and then how do they have time to all find the song? I mean, how do you manage the the time that you're putting them on the spot every single song as to scrambling to find the song in the songbook, right? Or not?
Well, I mean, I guess we have an art to that. Obviously, there's an old Jan Savage number that we recorded on our CD Brutal
Mm-hmm.
Boogie 20 years ago. That recording actually was done at Capitol Studios in Hollywood, but that's
Mm-hmm.
another story. But the song that Jan Savage did was called 720 in the Books, and it's because when you have a library of music, you don't really want to shout out the name of the tune because that's usually a lengthy title. You want to shout out a number. And so 720 was number 720 in Jan Savage's book. So that's why it was called 720 in the
I've
books.
danced to
And
that number, right?
yeah, and mind you, I don't want to shout it out. I mean, I want to make sure that I kind of like ease it into my conversation with my musicians. So
Yeah.
sometimes um, I'll have my back to the audience and I'll say number 29 or 186 or 211, and then everybody is attentive to that, and they spent a quick moment to get that number up, and I in turn tried to make a connection with the audience by either saying a G-ism, which is some sort of G-ism is something I say on stage that may not make sense on paper, but makes sense to everybody. It's hard to describe. You have to be there.
In the moment,
Yeah,
right?
or I say something about the song, or I just fill up that dead air because I sort of conceived myself as a disc jockey for my back of my radio days. In radio, you never want dead air, so I never want dead air on that stage because a dead air of 5 seconds can seem like 5 minutes when people are trained on you and you're the focus of that room. So um, there's a lot of stuff going on that perhaps the audience is not privy to that is happening in every moment on stage for sure.
So in a way, it's so funny. You went from being a DJ with that once a week big band radio program to becoming, I guess, a BJ, a band jockey. So your band is like the jukebox, and you're no, but in a sense, you're like pulling out from hundreds of songs. And I remember you mentioned to me 211 Shiny Stockings, right?
Right, exactly. You remembered. That's a
Yeah.
Frankie's favorite.
But
Yeah.
that is so interesting. Um, and there's another aspect to being a band leader that I'm curious about, and I've got um, I've got a quote here actually. Um, so and that is that you know something that's unseen is it you are not only multitasking on the stage, and you're working the music, the playlist, the audience, the musicians, communicating back and forth in both directions, um, but also you're working really hard to make the business work. And
Mm.
there is such a wonderful quote from 1984, and we actually have Joe Landini. He's one of the attendees. Joe from the Electric Banana, who very kindly did a Landolina. He's here, and he very kindly did research for this. But there's a wonderful article titled "Banned to Swing into New York." This was actually just before your first gig in New York, and this is the article. It says the group will play a couple of dates in early June at the Red Parrot. We'll talk about that in a moment. A nightclub at 617 West 57th Street in New York. Um, Quote from George G. "I just kept calling up these New York clubs," said G. "I said, hey, I got a real great swing band here." This, by the way, is when you were 24 years old, 1984.
Yeah,
And
that was a
then it carries
lifetime
on, the
ago.
article carries on talking about this 24-year-old sort of wunderkind, sort of crazy, cool band leader. G hustles hard and carries around personal press kits the way some people carry business cards. And then it says, I mean, it says a 24-year-old G is a Chinese big band leader, as a rare bird and a cool fellow. Um,
He should have
for-
said a rare bird and a cool cat. That would have been a conflict right
that,
there.
that, that,
Right?
um, and but I think one of the things that goes unrecognized, and one of the things I really want to appreciate about you, is that, having studied and spoken with you about what you've done all these decades, is you've worked really, really hard, and you've hustled hard continually, again and again and again, to make it work and to get jobs for your band. And so this is a great illustration of that. Um, so, I mean, do you want to say anything about that aspect of being
Yeah.
a band leader? Because it's
Well,
really
I
part of what
mean,
you do.
being I mean, I'm not fortunate enough to be as talented of a jazz musician as the folks that I surround myself with, and I'm blessed to be able to do so, because it would be really not as good situation if I surrounded myself with folks that are not as good as, well, you know what I'm getting at. But
Mhm.
working hard at your craft is a given, and that's my, besides, I like to think I have a good grasp of being a band leader on stage, but being a good band leader off stage is more important, because I think without gigs and without a tight ensemble and without a group of folks that are focused on in this case, playing happy music. I always want to make sure that I have a happy stage and a happy band, because I
Mhm.
honestly can't believe, and this is something I learned from Mr. Basie, that you can't play happy music if you don't have a happy band or nucleus to start with.
Mhm.
So, and since this is my passion, it's not like working. It's like, I wake up every day, and perhaps um, the big band industry has had its ups and downs, but at the same time, the recent modern resurgence of swing music and big band music and dancing has been a total blessing that I never imagined could ever occur. And so I'm already blessed with that already. So for me to continue it and to have
Mhm.
so many major iconic big band leaders and personalities in my corner has encouraged me to keep plugging away. And there's a lot of work. It's I've always been a one man operation, Jeremy, and um, I've worked with management companies, I've had agents, but I always end up uh, grabbing the bull by its horn. And you know, I think I've done an okay job. I have no regrets, and I still have a very vibrant future that I see down the road. Once we get past everything, but you know, I want to keep playing big band music and making people enjoy this great American art form and enjoy the jazz part of the music for sure. So I still got my work cut out for me. Is what I got. What
Well,
I'm aiming at.
it's so interesting because back in 1981, another quote from one of your articles in the papers, you said, a lot of people told me, so this is when you were 21 years old, a lot of
Right,
people
right.
told me we wouldn't work out, that we were a novelty and a fad and that people wouldn't dance to us. But you know, you just believed in what you were doing, you believed in the music, and you work really hard at it. So in that same article, it goes on to say, when people ask what I do, I tell them I'm a professional band leader, says George G, but I work part-time at the 7-Eleven to put bread on the table. So you work really hard to make this work from the very, very
especially in the
get-go.
begin, Especially in the beginning. You know, I've been fortunate to be a full time professional band leader for a while in my stay here in New York City, and
Mhm.
you know, coming back to New York City was a natural evolution. You mentioned the Red Parrot Club, and that was our first genuine professional big band show in my hometown of New York City, and it was such a thrill because I don't know if many of your folks or people in general remember the Red Parrot Club. That literally was like the Studio 54 of big band music. They had like a house big band. They would bring in big bands like Basie and the Stan Rubin Orchestra and the Widespread Depression Jazz Orchestra. So I called them up and said, "Hey, I'd like to come in from Pittsburgh to play your fabled venue." And it was a wild joint, man. It was like, you know, it was literally a discotheque that was a block long that had big ass parrots in cages hanging from the ceiling, the lights, and the beautiful people, the drugs in the bathroom, and this swinging big band music playing live. It was a wild scene. And that was in '84. And then in '86, another big milestone in New York City was when we played at Ralph Cooper's amateur night, not as an amateur act, but as the opening professional act. And that was a momentous occasion. As you know,
At,
you have
at
some Apollo
the
Theater,
famed Apollo Theater.
yes, in Harlem, 125th Street. I actually have I remember a photo of my name on the marquee of that theater back when they actually had a marquee. It's an electronic sign now, and I can't locate it because I've been trying to find it as part of my 40-year milestone recollection. But I'm trying to locate that photo of our name on the marquee of the Apollo Theater, and that was an amazing show. The audience loved us, and as you know, Jeremy, if they didn't like you at the Apollo Theater, they let you know. And at that time, my one of my entertainers in the ensemble from Pittsburgh was a gentleman named Shorts Davis. He was an older gentleman who tap danced with some of the greatest, like Buster Brown and Jimmy Sly
Mhm.
and Sam Ed Sims. And he actually played the Apollo with a Basie band back in the early '50s. So we shared stories about him coming back to the Apollo Theater in Harlem. And it was, you know, to be on the same stage that Ella Fitzgerald got his start, and James Brown, and you know, all the great names of the industry was quite a thrill. So the Red Parrot Club and the Apollo Theater were stepping stones for me to come back home to New York City. And as you know, Jeremy, as we talked about earlier, that led to my relationship with Margaret Batichuk and the New York Swing Dance Society, and how I discovered, how I discovered my all these greats of the Lindy movement
All
for
right.
sure.
Now everyone knows.
Should we share a little bit of one of the early dances that you played at the New York Swing Dance Society, Mary Batichuk's sort of swing dance society there, and this was at the, I believe this was at the Cat Club when it was
The
in
Cat
one of
Club,
its
yes.
earliest locations. And this is the wonderful Frankie Manning leading Shim Sham. So we'll just catch a few parts of this.
From the archive. I think this is from 1988.
And then he gets up on stage. So did you
Yes.
know he was going to get up on stage, or was that a surprise when he just jumped up on stage with you?
I think at the moment it was a surprise because this is one of the first instances that I met Frankie and Norma and Don and at this event at the Cat Club. So I wasn't really familiar with. Actually, this is sort of before Frankie was the big. He was still a legend in the making in modern history. So I was not familiar with Frankie Manning at that moment.
Yeah. Let's take a look at what happens, because one of the things that when I look back at this video, one of the things that I think is fascinating with respect to what you do as a band leader is, Frank is on stage leading the call for the dancers, and then
Mm-hmm.
he looks around to you, and there's this sort of really, for me, it's like this really special interaction that really is between, your band, Frankie, and the dancers, and you'll see it
Mm-hmm.
happen. So just watch, for those of you watching here, just watch what happens on stage.
Dance! Free! Dance! 16 Everybody free! Nine.
What a special moment.
That was special. And,
Yeah.
I also saw when Norma was called up by Frankie, that brought a smile to your face as well. So,
Mm-hmm. That video has special meaning, extra special meaning to me because back in the 80s, I really discovered videotaping and documenting. It was easy. I mean, mind you, my friend, my cameraman who took that video had a bulky VHS video camera, but it was sort of like the forerunner of video.
mhm.
So I digitized that VHS tape like 5, 6 years ago because I had a whole bunch of VHS tapes, but I never actually looked at it till recently, like a couple months ago. So when I found the video of Frankie calling the Shim Sham at one of our first shows at the Cat Club in the late '80s, it was eye popping. I mean, obviously, I know Frankie very well and know of his stature in the music business, but then to additionally see him call Norma out and see her silhouette, you know, you see her hair and her big glasses, her big eyeglasses that was her trademark. The silhouette of that, and then them two leading the Shim Sham, it just blew my mind. I mean, I felt like that was, and to know that I had that video, that image in my hard drive in my old VHS tape for all those decades because I don't remember. I might not have looked at that videotape since like the late '80s or so, for sure. So, yeah,
Right.
Frankie and knowing Frankie and Don and Norma and having their love and support and their was always a big, big thing to me. And in fact, I was really lucky to continue my relationship with the New York Swing Dance Society to even this day. But after that show, my friend Judy Pritchett, Frankie's partner, a life partner, she told me a story years later. She said, don't take this wrong, George, but the day after you debuted at the Cat Club, all the next day, Frankie and all the Uptown Harlem old guys were up at S'mores Paradise for a big band dance on Monday night. And the word that buzzed out was everybody was saying, "Hey, did you see that swinging Chinaman last night at the Cat Club?" And she said, and mind you, they all said that with plenty of love. Did you all see that swinging Chinaman at the Cat Club last night? So I wear that with a badge of honor. I'm a proud swinging Chinaman in the most loving way, for sure.
Well, you obviously made a very big impression and became part of that scene and still are a huge part of that scene. Um, so, in terms of that transition to New York that we're talking about now, there was that quote that sort of whizzed by, but from Lionel Hampton. And I think it's an interesting reflection here on your transition. So apparently, is this true that Lionel Hampton, the great Lionel Hampton, said this to you in a somewhat playful way, but somewhat meaning it?
I'll quantify this his quote. He said this to me every time he saw me, not just once.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Seriously, every time he said. So tell us the backstory. So how did
Well,
you originally connect with the musicians of Lionel Hampton's orchestra? Tell us the whole
well,
story.
that man that actually was performing at the Cat Club was an indication of my relationship with the great Lionel Hampton and his orchestra and his musicians. There was a gentleman in my band in Pittsburgh, Kevin Brown, who played baritone saxophone. Uh, he he was a former member of the Lionel Hampton band from the early '80s. So obviously, when we came to New York, he said, "Hey George, I can hook. I use New York City musicians to kind of lighten up my load of traveling. And of course, New York City was was a beehive of great talent to start with. So he said, I'll connect you with all these cats from Lionel Hampton's band. So in that band, I had, besides Kevin Brown on baritone saxophone, Doug Miller on tenor saxophone, who played with Lionel Hampton, who now, for the last 2 decades, have been with the Count Basie Orchestra. Um, the late great trombonist Charles Stevens, who was with Lionel Hampton, and Al Bryant, another late great trumpet player who played with Lionel Hampton in my trumpet section, and a few other scattering of musicians, but they were all musicians, Lionel Hampton big band, and that was based in New York City. So, so when when I eventually came home to New York City to be to extend my big band career, I looked up these cats to join my New York City band, and we all had a great relationship. So whenever I saw Lionel Hampton, whether he came, at a concert or a festival, he would always say, I would always say, "Hey Gates," that was his nickname. Everyone called him Gates, even if you didn't know him very well, you called him Gates, because the term was he swung like a rusty gate. So I said, "Hey Gates, hi, I'm George G. I'm a new band leader in New York City. I love your big band." And he would always say, "Yeah, you're the cat who's stealing all my musicians," and then kind of like walk away. And Lionel Hampton did say that tongue in cheek, but I gotta admit that perhaps he was at times a cranky old dude, and I think he might have meant it more than he did. You know what I mean? So, but
So
Lionel Hampton was another gentleman who I was privileged to have a relationship with. Obviously, as everyone knows, one of the greatest big band leader of all time, for sure.
and his Flying Home, of course, a very, very famous song which dancers love, and you incorporated into your, standard repertoire depending on the audience, right?
Right. Oh, yes. Flying Home is a great tune. That's sort of a tune that a lot of the modern swing dancers use for the Big Apple. Um, but it's also a tune that was famous during the big band era. It featured the original iconic tenor saxophone solo by Arnett Cobb, which these days is dutifully recreated by our tenor saxophonist Michael Hashim. He does a great job on a Flying Home tenor sax solo for sure. I love that tune. It's sort of become a trademark for swing dancers all around the world.
Right. And during this period that you were sort of growing your band, had started out just with local gigs in Pittsburgh, then started to go back and forth to New York. I mean, it's fair to say, and I really would love your comment on this if you feel like commenting on it. Things weren't always easy, and I asked you at one point in our private conversation, did you experience prejudice? I mean, was there,
Mm.
did you have to deal with racial prejudice? And you explained a story about the local 6471, the musicians union in Pittsburgh. And I don't know if you just want to say a little bit or about sort of some of the barriers you had to overcome in your work, in getting work.
Well, yes. I mean, especially in today's climate, I want to make sure that it's recognized the fact that I'm very proud of the fact that obviously during the big band era, there was a serious segregation between the black bands and the white bands. You had Benny Goodman and um, Jimmy Lunsford, um, and then certain musicians started playing with black musicians start playing with the white bands. Like for example, Teddy Wilson with the Benny Goodman band, Roy Eldridge with the June Cooper Orchestra, etc. So I've always been proud that I've always been known kind of like as a UN swing band. I'd like to recognize musicians for not just for the talent, but for their heart and soul and their character. That's equally important to me. So I try to present myself in that same present format. So I like to think that being a band leader of somewhat substance, I attract the same, and that everyone in my ensemble are the same, whatever their race, or color or creed is. That's not really the importance. The importance is yes, talent, but more importantly, character and heart and soul. When I first started in Pittsburgh, as much as I love my decade in Pittsburgh, it, it thinks of itself as a big city, which it is. It's a medium big city, but it still had some backward thinking, especially back 35 years ago or 40 years ago in Pittsburgh in the late 70s, early 80s. So my relationship with the other band leaders and the musicians union at that time may not have been always optimum. I always had a mixed band naturally. And myself being Asian American was not the typical mode of your society big band leader. So when I started going outside of campus, playing private parties and country clubs, I did meet some resistance from other band leaders and the audience, not as much as the audience as just people in structure of power, etc. When I came back to New York City, I mean, New York City has always been more of a diverse population and mentality. That's what makes New York so great. And I think in New York City, I think the acceptance of our mixedness was more natural, more accepted, and I'm just very proud that I've always had a mixed ensemble. I as long as you swing and a cool cat, you're welcome in the G band for sure. That's my philosophy for sure. You know.
And did you, and in all the years that you've been, a big band swing leader, have you ever felt or thought of yourself in the context of, sort of the Asian American role in big band swing music? From going back, you mentioned to me the Forbidden City in San Francisco, the Kim Lu sisters, and there's this sort of uh, not always known about, but quite an important subcurrent of Asian American contribution to the big band era. So do you see yourself in sort of that tradition in a sense, or are you aware of that? Do you think about that?
Yes, I think, but by just setting an example and putting myself and ourselves out there is the best
Mm,
mouthpiece that I can offer.
mm,
Back in the days of the 40s and the 30s, segregation was very prominent. So even Asian American performers were limited in their territory and boundaries of where they were able to perform. So Forbidden City was a Northern California nightclub that had some great talent, musicians, singers, you know, dancers, etc. And uh, I think that was limited. But right now, I just want people when they see my band on stage, whether it's in um, Times Square or Westchester or Portland or San Luis Obispo or Malaysia or Tokyo, um, I want them just to see an ensemble of good souls playing hashtag swing makes you happy music. Notice I got that hashtag swing makes you happy in
ah,
there. You know what I mean?
so that's what we should hashtag for this. And actually, on that note, we're at the halfway mark. So let's just have a quick look at the chat. You've got lots and lots of
Okay.
friends and people from your bands and from parts of your life who've come along to this, and which are
This is I love this part, Jeremy. So do we have some people out there
yeah, well, I'll
checking
just
the?
go through very quickly so you don't have to read
Okay.
it yourself.
Well,
But Joe Landolini is here from Pittsburgh.
hello,
Like I
Joe.
said, he goes all the way back to the Electric Banana, and it did make me laugh that you went from Electric Banana to Red Parrot, and then in fact you went after that to the predecessor of Swing 46, which what was the Red.
Red Blazer too.
The Red Blazer,
TOO.
yes. All these clubs and connected. So you've got hello from Pittsburgh from Joe, howdy from San Francisco from Peggy, who did the clapperboard. Jack is saying hi from Palm Springs. Um, Rick in Mesquite, Nevada, and we've got Sue in Jersey City, and she loved the Cool Jobs clip, and I think that's
Mm.
Sue Gould. Um, and Zamet in East Biggs, California. And she said that Swing 46, which we're going to talk about in more detail soon, was my
Hmm.
highlight of going to New York City. And it's always my highlight of going to New York City. So anytime I'm in New York City, I will make a point to make my business trips include a Tuesday night, especially to see you, George, every single
Yes,
time.
Annie.
And
We're looking forward to having you back, Annie.
yeah, you've already got a potential gig lined up here. Someone is asking, so George, will you play for my delayed birthday party in SF whenever available? It's from Peggy. So I think you've got a paying gig there lined up. Um, and then there's actually a question from Peggy. How much do you have to prepare in advance for a gig? And I guess, in terms of like rehearsals or things like that. So maybe we'll address that in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And Alan Schneider loves the tune 720 in the book. And I've never thought about, now I know that all your tunes have numbers. It's like, that's what that means. Um, and
Oh, and
then,
Alan is a early member of my Pittsburgh band back at Carnegie Mellon University too.
oh,
So I want to
wow.
do a shout out to Alan out there.
Wow. And then,
I always see him. I only see him every year at the City Field opening day for the New York Mets, and unfortunately, the Mets baseball season has been postponed.
uh,
So We'll
And then
catch up
Anne
soon.
Zamet, she says she danced with Georgie, great time also. And then Alex Norris, he says, hi
Mm.
everybody.
Yes, Alex Norris is one of the premier trumpet players of New York City, no doubt, and a regular member of the Swing 46 gang
Wow,
with us.
that's
Hi,
great.
Alex.
And then Susan Gould, it says, when we were
Welcome
talking
back,
about your
Susan.
press kits, she laughed. She said, your press kits. So obviously your press kits made an impression even 30 years later.
Yeah.
That is so funny. And then there's, um, I'm just having a look. There's so many little comments here. The need, so Jackie says, we need the Sirius XM station to hear, to, broadcast your band and your music. So maybe you
Did
should.
you know last Memorial Day I had a pilot on 40s Junction, which is on XM Sirius Radio, and
Ah,
I played a show of retro, modern, and traditional big band swing, and it went over really well. And unfortunately, it didn't get renewed yet. It's still in the works, but it
ah.
was really a thrill to have a radio show broadcast numerously on XM Sirius last Memorial Day, 2019.
Maybe big circle back to your days at Carnegie Mellon. We should
Yes,
try and get you a weekly station there, a weekly show.
I've been I've been thinking about doing during this quarantine times an online big band a resurrection of the Make Believe Ballroom radio show. So I've been playing
Oh,
because I have
I'd
so
listen
much
to it.
music in my
Uh-huh.
own library that I would love to do a Make Believe Ballroom radio show somehow with with brief commentary and I
Oh,
was looking at some
George,
apps.
George,
Yes, yes.
why don't do it? I mean, let's, do it. Why don't you just
Okay,
do it? I'll help you, and I'm sure lots of people listening will help. I'm
because
serious. We'll make it happen.
well, the two things that I really wanted to do since we last spoke, of course, is I
Mhm.
wanted to create a timeline. Our conversations that we've been having, Jeremy, has
Yeah.
really been encouraging me to create a nice timeline of my
Mhm.
40 years. And then the other thing was after our last portrait conversation last week, I want to do a resurrection of the Make Believe Ballroom, maybe just an hour show, like sort of a podcasty type of program. So, Jeremy, I need your help.
Oh, we'll make that happen, and I'm sure also lots of people listening are experts in this. But I'm serious. After this, let's make it happen.
Okay, okay.
This is the time. Charlene Troy, who was here last
Hi,
week, also says
Charlene.
hi. George,
Oh,
great to see
yes,
you.
Charlene.
Alan,
She's the hippest of Southern California.
and then Alan Schneider says, so Wickley, but we met at Weymouth's, Red Blazer 2 in a snowstorm. I'm sure it's all, you probably understand everything. H. Smith says, Buster Brown, Tap Jam Remembrances. So,
Buster Brown. Buster Brown is a legendary tap dancer, and I helped them create an event at the beginning of Swing 46 called Buster Brown's Crazy Tap Jam. Because tap and big band music has always been an interlocking relationship. Um, and meeting and I used to drive Buster, and all these kids would come and tap dance and just swing jazz music. It was an amazing situation. So um, I'm always proud of the Buster Brown Crazy Tap Jam at Swing
mm.
46 for
So
sure.
in fact, it's interesting you mentioned that because, of course, we have a clip lined up. If you feel you want to share a bit of it
Uh huh.
with one of your band leader heroes, Cab Calloway, and it's a clip that also features
Mm,
the Nicholas brothers, who, of
yes.
course, were amazing everything, tap dancers, athletes, splits like nobody has ever done since. Um, but it's interesting the relationship between the big band and the dance, which is something we're going to get into a little bit more, and tap dance and Lindy Hop dance. It
Well,
all actually is like comes together.
that clip to a Cab Calloway's band with the Jump and Jive and the Nicholas Brothers is an iconic dance sequence, and the Nicholas Brothers. There's I recently saw um, an interview with Gregory Hines, the late great Gregory Hines. And he always said when he was coming up, people would always say, "Wow, you guys dance just like the Nicholas brothers." And they weren't really hip to the Nicholas brothers till they saw the Nicholas brothers on video, specifically that clip from Cal Calloway's band. And then he said, Gregory Hines says, "There's no freaking way that we even come close to dancing like the Nicholas brothers. Stop saying that." You know what I mean?
Okay, well, we
But
can
yes,
show that in a moment. There's a question actually from my cousin Rick in London.
aha,
He says, "Hi, George and Jeremy. I'm a hobbyist drummer, and whilst it's not my style, that meaning swing is not his style, the
yes,
best
yes.
drummer that has ever been is Buddy Rich, in his
Hmm.
opinion. You know, it's always a
Hmm.
personal opinion. Do you have a favorite drummer? Because he's a drummer, so he's interested to know your thoughts on. Do you have a favorite big band swing drummer?"
I have two favorite big band drummers, if I can indulge myself. One is of course is Joe Jones, whose rhythm with the Count Basie bands in the early '50s is, for me, none comparable to anybody. I mean, his big band drumming with the Count Basie band is my favorite. Um, my favorite big band drummer overall as a leader also is Gene Krupa. I feel like Gene Krupa was a great, besides being a great big band drummer, but he was also a great entertainer. And
Mm.
as obviously you know, I love the melding of being an entertainer and a good musician together. So yes, Gene Krupa and Joe Jones are some of my favorite. I like Buddy Rich also, and Chig Webb, but they're more of an acquired taste. And they are obviously in my top echelon of favorite big band drummers. But I got to give the kudos to Joe Jones and Gene
Ah,
Krupa
thank you
for
for
sure.
sharing that. And so, yes, so love you, Georgia, from Alan. And then Bill says, "Yes, let's make it happen with you getting your radio station. I think
All
it's going to
right,
be a huge success." Um, and then H.
because um, not to interrupt you, but my big deal is that DJs who play music for swing dancing don't honor the classics as much. Not just my humble opinion, but there's so many tunes from the repertoire of Basie, Artie Shaw, Billy May, and you know Claude Thornhill and Lionel Hampton and Jimmy Lunceford that could be so big band favorites and danceable that it's not out there. And I I want to put them out there more. Of course, do you know that when I signed off from WRCT in the Make Believe Ballroom in Pittsburgh back before I came back to New York City, on my last radio program, I did a really hokey thing. I played 27 different versions of In the Mood to end my big band program
Oh my
in
gosh.
Pittsburgh. I did a version by Louis Armstrong and like 8 versions by Glenn Miller. I even did a version by Ray Stevens and Hen House 5 when the chickens clucked in the mood. You
Oh
can
my.
look it up, Ray Stevens and House 5.
Is that, by the way,
So,
is that recorded? Can we hear a recording of that show with the 27 versions
oh,
of In the Mood?
no, I don't. That's lost into the annals of history.
Oh, okay. Hank says, "Yep, tap was it, and we all looked forward to it." So the energy
Hmm.
that tap dancers gives to the musicians, just like Lindy dancers give to the musicians, is actually a
Of
very
course.
important part of the chemistry that's going on in the moment on stage when you're in front of your band.
Oh, of course. I just recently discovered a video when we performed at the Frankie Manning Centennial at the Apollo Theater. I performed with an entertainer from LA called, Chester Whitmore. I mean, Chester Whitmore danced to this tune called Chester Madness with me conducting the Apollo Theater All Star Orchestra. That
Mm.
blew my mind. I mean, it was so old school. And I've had the privilege of performing with Chester at the Cicada Club, at Catalina, and the Red Plate, the Swing 46. So I know what Chester is capable of. But if you guys can look up this video of Chester Whitmore doing Chester Madness at the Frankie Manning Centennial at the Apollo Theater,
Mm.
it's amazing. It is rhythmic, skillful, and entertaining. And that's what tap is all about.
Right. And is that on your YouTube channel?
Yes, I have a playlist, Frankie Manning Centennial or videos by others. I have a
Yeah.
playlist of videos by others.
So,
Yes, that's on my YouTube channel.
yeah, so I do recommend everyone who's tuning in here that you do take time to visit George G's YouTube channel. It is an unbelievable wealth of amazing videos spanning, almost 40 years, 35 years going back.
Yep, yep.
And some pretty amazing videos of dance and music. So I've got a link on the page for this portrait conversation. Um, so let's just get back. So very briefly, Peggy asked about preparation for a gig. So do you have to
Hmm.
do much, or do you just turn up and it's like dive in, or do you prepare much? Do you
It
rehearse?
depends. It depends on the situation. Um, like Swing 46, since I'm there like twice a week, 3 times a week, 50 weeks a year, for 23 years going, it's almost like another appendage of my body. Um, but like, I mean, if I'm doing a concert, which I'm doing a dedication to like Basie or Dorsey or Harry James, then I spend some time organizing my repertoire, rehearse if necessary. Usually the cats in the band
Hmm.
know the music well enough that rehearsals is not dictated. Um, and then if I do a wedding, oh man, that's like a piece of another. Like if I, depending on the bride, I mean, I gotta prepare like a whole different type of repertoire because in weddings and such, I'm an all-inclusive musical organization. Like besides swing music and Sinatra and Gershwin and Cole Porter, I expand my repertoire to keep the dance floor happy. So I do some Motown and funk and R&B and some contemporary, some disco. We play some mean discos at weddings. So at weddings, I tend to have a little bit more prep work in anticipating of situations like that.
That's
I
so
mean,
interesting.
yeah, another thing that I'm very proud of, Jeremy, is that besides playing weddings for regular folks, but I've been privileged to play so many weddings of Lindy hoppers over the years, and I was making a mental list of it the other day, and I've done so many swing dancers' weddings, um, all across the country. I'm responsible for a lot of happy unions, I guess. You know what I mean?
Literally. And you mentioned that people come up to you and mention they met at your Swing 46 or wherever at some of your gigs. Should we just play a little bit of Cap Calloway and tiny bit of the
Yes,
Nicholas Brothers?
I was gonna suggest if you have the ability to play this to the part where Cab Calloway sings, but then jump starting it to when the Nicholas brothers come on.
Okay, let's do
It,
that.
it might be
You
a
may you
yeah.
may have to help me with the positioning here. So let's get this going.
This is the great Cab Calloway, and you know what? This scene was originally in black and white, but lately on the internet, a lot of YouTube black and white videos have been colorized. I'm not too sure about it, but this is a video that was just recently colorized. Looks pretty good, I guess.
And it's from the movie Stormy Weather.
I, yes, I believe so.
I'm going to move it forward a bit. So where Cab Calloway
Yeah.
will go here. Here he is.
I think the Nicholas brothers show up pretty soon. Chop with a bunch of cats. And Cab Calloway is the heck
Jim,
of
jam, jump it, jump it, jive makes you dig your jive on the mellow side. Hip, hip. Hip, hip. Jim, jam, jump is a solid jive. Makes you 9 foot tall when you're 4'5". Hip, hip. Hip, hip. Now don't you be
I'll
that
move it forward
Ickle
to
get
the Nicholas Brothers. Let's see.
There they are. is a great scene.
They're literally instruments in the band.
Oh yeah. And mind you, they're not playing. They're going ghost in the music, but still is an amazing scene. I mean, they're not actually playing music during this film.
And then, of course, there's the unbelievable ending of this film,
Oh
which
yeah.
always makes me think, "Oh my gosh!"
This is an amazing
Yeah, well,
scene.
this.
They ain't done yet.
They ain't done yet. Wow.
A perfect collaboration besides between big band jazz and dance. I mean, I had the privilege of meeting Harold and Nicholas at different times. Harold and Fayard. Fayard was a big fan of big band jazz, and he attended many big dance events in New York. He was really, really so smitten by the modern swing dance resurgence.
Right. So
Thank you for playing that, Jeremy.
well, I think it sort of says a lot about the energy of the music and the dancers. Um, did you want to share a little bit about that sort of playoff between, how over the years, how have the dancers influenced what you play as a band, and what is that relationship between you and the dancers and Lindy Hop?
Well, being around as long as we have in a decades that we've been actively performing for dancers, we've actually seen so many fads, or maybe not fads is not the right word, but different styles become popular and come back and lost its interest. In other words, I remember, it's West Coast swing and blues dancing was more the rage, and then everybody loved Charleston and Balboa and Eight Count and so Jitterbug and Lindy Hop, and now hot jazz is the rage, But for me, Jeremy, I'm a true blue card carrying big band fan club lover here, in New York, in America, in the world. So I truly think that big band music is the ultimate Lindy Hop dance music. And I perhaps I've had conversations with like Frankie and Norma and Don, and I'd like to think that they agreed with such notions. Now, Don Hampton was very specific about the music. She always wanted the musicians and the dancers to pay attention to each other, rightfully so. So I think in a band like the George G. String Orchestra, which is very jazz based, over the decades, we can excel in recreating traditional big band jazz in the style of Chick Webb and Benny Goodman and Count Basie. But at the same time, we have evolved over the years, having influenced by various types of music and jazz, swing, funk, bebop, and just philosophy of life. So the music in the George G. String Orchestra has not stood still, but I like to proudly say that, due to the arrangements of my musicians and my music director, Mr. David Gibson, it has created a different style of dance music, but at the same time, well rooted into big band tradition. Don always wanted to make sure that the dancers dance to the music, and the big band, when it's not in an ensemble mode, in the solo mode, would play off the dancers. They fed off of each other. Obviously, solos in a big band art form need to be in the pocket and swing. You never want to go off the tangent that it's not in the pocket, because once you sway off the pocket, it's not really swinging per se.
Could
And
you?
Don,
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, George. Could you just explain very briefly, as best as possible? I realize these are things which can't be explained in words very well, but what does in the pocket mean? Because I mean, I've heard that, but there may be people listening who are not musicians and who actually are not really sure what that means. So, in the the best way possible. I mean, I realize I'm
Oh,
asking you an impossible question here. What does in the
well,
pocket mean?
I will tell you and our gracious audience today what I think in the pocket means. Um, I'm a little biased towards my beliefs, so I will go with it. For me, in the pocket means like Basie always said when you play for an audience. He told me this, and he told like he is documented in a fact that when you play for an audience, you look for someone in the audience, and your attention pays to them, and if they're tapping, if they're snapping their fingers or tapping their toes, then you know that you are doing the right thing. So in our case, in the pocket to me means like if it's in the groove, if you can snap your fingers to it. In that pocket, don't forget that big band music are played by big band musicians. And lest we not forget, big band musicians are human beings. They are not electronic drum machines. Um, Electronic drum machines will never be able to swing because they are not human beings. Human beings breathe, okay? And when you breathe, you never breathe in such a strict tempo that you don't variate from the pocket. So the pocket is this groove, so where it has some leeway. Um, so like certain band horns will play behind the pocket, so they're playing behind the beat, but not playing behind the beat so much that they're dragging. And it's such a fine, minute distinction of that. So some dancers or some musicians or some parts of a big band arrangement can
Mm.
be ahead of the pocket, and but not so much that they're rushing. Because once you're rushing, um, then your tempo creeps up, and you don't want to be outside. You don't want to be rushing or dragging. So that pocket is right. There's that groove of space that you have permission to move, and preferably, uh, if it's an ensemble, it's done together as an ensemble. If it's a soloist or a singer, like Sinatra, I mean, he was the perfect example because he learned from the breathing technique of trombonist Tommy Dorsey that um, your inflection of notes has that pocket. Once again, you never want to be on the back of the pocket that you're dragging. You never want to be ahead of the pocket that you're rushing. And I challenge anyone to define it better than that.
Wow.
If you do, keep it to yourself.
Wow, that's
I
amazing.
mean,
Well,
yeah.
should we show a little bit of Dawn Hampton dancing with John Dokes to
Mm.
Splanky?
Okay. Now, Splanky is a good example of the pocket because
Oh,
Neil Hefti wrote this for the Count Basie band, and Dawn loved this tune, and she loved dancing with John Dokes, one of our premier, a long-time performers with the G band. Dawn, John Dokes' heritage is from dancing. He loved dancing. His Lindy Hop heritage is big band dancing music. But there's literally hundreds of videos on YouTube, not just on my channel, of Dawn and John Dokes dancing together. And Yehudi did this really fun clip recently, Yehudi.com, a Lindy Hop website, of Dawn and John dancing together. So if you'd like to play a few snippets of it, it'd be kind of fun.
yeah. Let's take a look. So, so here it is. So first of all, This is
Uh,
the wonderful Dawn Hampton, who we lost, I guess, a little while ago.
3 years
But
ago now, I
what a
believe,
special
4 years
person,
ago. Yeah.
and very much part of the world Lindy Hop community. We all love her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is the Yehudi series of clips introduced by actually a local friend of mine here in San Francisco, Manu, who at the time, I guess he lived in New York before he came here.
Hello, and welcome back to DSPN Dance Center for the finalists of the Splanky Battle. Our finalists are two incredible performers. One, a dance music legend, and the guy that's dancing with her. It's a toe-to-toe battle you won't want to miss, featuring the music of George G. and his Make-Believe Ballroom Orchestra. So without further pause, let's take a look at our finalists.
First up, Dawn Hampton, dancer, cabaret legend. She's got more moves in her big toe than most have in a lifetime. Versus John Doak, singer, dancer. John is well versed in the lindy hop as well as old school hip hop of the day. This looks to be an amazing battle, so let's take it to the floor.
The only thing I hate about this video, Jeremy, is that Dokes and Dawn is outshining the band swinging on Spanky. And you know what? This painting, Jeremy, I mean, I remember well, Jeremy, this is a Jeremy Sutton original of Dawn Hampton, and it hangs proudly in Dawn's corner at Swing 46. And people comment on it all the time. It's beautiful.
Yep.
It's beautiful. Is mine gonna be, I hope mine is a fraction as nice. Dawn is such a royal subject. It's she's a hard act to follow.
That was actually painted at Harang, and it was one of the fancy dress nights, the costume nights. So she was dressed up to the nines, and yeah. Anyway, so that's very special, and the fact that that hangs in Swing 46 means a lot to me, because that that was like a second home to Dawn. Talking of Swing 46. Let's actually take a moment to talk about Swing 46. So for those who are not familiar, Swing 46 is a few blocks, well, actually 2 blocks from Times Square in the middle of New
Mhm.
York City. It's been going for 23 years. And in fact,
Well, what day
in
is
that
today?
conversation,
Yes.
George, you looked up the date of your very, very first gig at Swing 46. And guess what? Today is the anniversary, 23 years ago today. Your
Thank you for
first,
reminding me.
your
You're
first
right.
gig at Swing 46 just after it opened.
And um, and I wanted to mention that
Congratulations.
my backdrop is the stage and mural on the stage of Swing 46. You know, and it opened up. We were the first band to play there on June 5th, 1997, and previously it was a club called the Red Blazer 2. And the Red Blazer 2 was a traditional jazz club, but they were a lot more on the square side compared to Swing 46. Once Swing 46 opened up during the resurgence of the modern swing era, and swing dancers and from uh, locally and tourists, they always love going to Swing 46. It's a place where they all know your name, and they always have swinging bands. I've been there on Tuesday nights and many Friday nights, and with all different variations of my big band. It's always been a great home. It's a great in this time and age, Jeremy. It is for a band and a band leader like myself. It is such a blessing to have a regular home in a club right off of Times Square, arguably the center of the universe. For culture and jazz. So Swing 46 is very dear to my heart. And I always meet people that say, "Oh, I saw you at Swing 46," or we had to, when we came to visit New York City, we had to come and see you at Swing 46. So there's a lot of history and at Swing 46 that I am so proud to be a part of.
Well,
It's a great little joint.
I think it should also, just be said that it's really, really, I think, probably pretty unique in the world in that it's a club that is a true supper club for dance, with a dance floor, and that has big band swing music 7 nights a week.
Yes.
When the coronavirus is not around, so that's a whole other thing. But
Yeah.
but it's very, very special, and we the fact that you are part of this movement that's keeping the live performance of big band swing music around, along with many others around many of whom are your friends. And in fact, in conversation, you've talked about the Battle of the Bands and your friend Bill Elliott and other people.
Mhm.
Do you want to say just a little bit about your relationship with other big bands, and how you mentioned that when you do the Battle of the Bands, you said there's always a winner at the end, and then you maybe share who that winner is.
Yeah, yes, I always cause a moment of anticipation and perhaps pre-anxiety, because at the end of these battles, I always say to the audience, this has been a great night of big band jazz with you know who the winner is, and there's always a moment of silence, and I'll say, you, the dancers, and then everybody starts laughing and clapping, and
Yeah.
maybe a sigh of relief here and there, because I've been known to be an instigator of battle of big bands all around the world. I mean, I've done battles with Bill Elliott in New York and LA and DC, Philadelphia. I've done battles with Dean Moore and Jonathan Stout, the Crescent Jazz Orchestra in Tokyo, the Basie Band in Zurich. So I always treat these battles as a goodwill gathering of top jazz, big band jazz musicians on the same stage. And when you have musicians of this quality, they have a natural, you would expect them to have a natural creative competitiveness in the streak, but not to the point of uh, too much rivalry. I mean, there's a natural rivalry, there's a natural competition, but it's always a time for these musicians to show the best they can to the audience, and that is egged on by the fact there's another big band on the other side of the stage.
Yeah, and just to give
You know what I
a
mean?
little bit of background to those of you tuning in who may not be familiar with the big
The
band
Battle of the Big
sort of
Band, yes.
history. So in the Savoy Ballroom in New York City, they were very famous for their Battle of Big Bands, where they would have two huge bands, you know, the house band, Chick Webb's band, you know, maybe the Count Basie band, and they would have them so that literally there was non-stop music for the whole evening. And as one band finished a set, the other band would actually often pick up that song and continue. So there was literally no break, and it was sort of known as the Battle of the Bands. Um, and at the end, sometimes they would play together. Is that right? I mean, did you, you know,
Yes.
you sometimes
Well,
have 34 musicians on stage
right.
all playing at the same
That's
time.
always the finale. I always think the bands combining is the finale, but we trade songs. Usually we play a setup separately, and let the dancers warm up to the audience and the bands. But then the last set we trade songs, and then I think both bands never choose what songs they want to play. They want to hear what the other band plays, and they counteract with a song to
So it's a conversation, in other words.
yes.
I'm
And
talking
then
of
the finale is both bands jamming together, and to have 34 big band musicians on stage blowing, soloists competing against each other and dueling against each other. It's quite a big band spectacle.
would the end number often be something as high energy as Jumping at the Woodside or Sing Sing Sing? I mean, would those be
Yeah,
the end ones?
that would be the natural thing, and usually it's a very lengthy song because we like to throw my saxophone player against their saxophone player, my trumpet man against their trumpet person. So it can be a lengthy song, and the energy and the intensity builds up to a little climax where the big band's fireworks go off like a lot. I mean, I've done it with Bill Elliott at the Lincoln Center Midsummer Night's Swing on a hot summer day. I've done it with Dean Mora in DC at Glen Echo Park. One of my top big band battles was with the Basie band with Benny Powell at the Zurich Arts Festival back in 2001, and that was an amazing show. There was like 30,000 fans in this massive train station, and they all went bonkers for sure. And then the most iconic band battle I think I did was with Bill Elliott, where one weekend we did it at the Hollywood Palladium in California, Los Angeles, and then the next week we did the original battle of the bands on the deck of the USS Intrepid in New York City on an aircraft carrier. Those are some of the most memorable battles I've done.
Wow.
And then all these band leaders I love. I mean, Jeremy, I love band leaders that have their hearts in the right places. And they know that. And they would never do a battle with the big bands. I would never do it with a battle with a big band if their hearts weren't in the right place. And mind you, not all battles of the big bands have been a love fest, but the majority of them have been. And I have the utmost respect for my colleagues in the big band business, most of them.
Well, we hope that your swing makes you happy. We hope that happiness and love is the predominant feeling, even in a battle.
Preach, brother, preach.
One of the people who's joining us right now live, Roger Dannenberg, commented on John Dokes and Dawn Hampton, saying the dancers were front and center, but I loved how they took the roles of the brass and the sax dialogue in the music. Good to see you again, George, and the band is swinging. So,
I want to do a shout out to Dr. Roger Dannenberg, one of my original members in my Pittsburgh Carnegie Mellon big band. And Roger Dannenberg is a premier professor of, I believe, computer science, and he was the forefront of computer science at Carnegie Mellon University. And he used to bring these wild electronic contraptions that he would attach to his horn to make these crazy sounds with our swing band that I know must be historic in some way. It's like having the original Apple computer by Steve Wozniak or something like that.
Maybe Roger can write if he's still got that with him.
It's probably in the museum by now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then Jackie liked the painting I did of Dawn, and Roger Dannenberg laughs. He says, "Computer science, yes, thanks." So let's change gear a little bit, because in the 90s you came out to the West Coast, your first West Coast tour, and you, I think, started off the tour in Northern California, ended it in Southern California, and in Northern California, there's this wonderful video. I'm just going to show a few seconds of it because we're running short on time. But this is actually people near and dear to me in the local San Francisco Lindy Hop community. In 1998, Claremont Hotel, and this was George G's first West Coast tour. So let's just hear a little bit of this. I'd love to play the whole of that. And I think it's on your YouTube channel.
Yes, it is.
LeVay Smith, Chris Siebert, and in fact, Jules Broussard there in the background playing.
Members of the Red Hot
saxophone.
Skilletmakers and the band, yes, the G band.
Very special. You know, they're still all playing locally. Well, not right this moment, but actually they're playing via Facebook Live. I think LeVay and Chris are amongst the many local musicians who have adapted to the COVID-19 by doing live performances. You were actually a really important part of what happened on the West Coast. I started Lindy Hop in 1995 and would be going to Café de Nord and the Highball and the Broadway Studios. You played all those places.
Yes,
and especially for you, oops, here it is. Especially for you today, I'm wearing my Highball T-shirt.
It's a bowling shirt, I guess, right? Is that what it's called?
It's a Highball
it's beautiful.
Shirt, especially for memory of those days, because you were one of the bands I danced to back
we
in
played
the 90s.
all over Northern, Southern California, Portland, Seattle. I mean, we toured constantly back in those days. Seattle, Miami, Orlando, Charlotte, DC, Boston, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. It was a crazy time.
Also beautiful ballrooms like the Avalon Ballroom in Catalina Island, one of the largest ballrooms of its type.
Yes.
That you were told apparently that when you played that, the ballroom really liked your music, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a great movie documentary made recently by Susan Glatzer called Alive and Kickin', and it kind of documented the modern swing era community. And there was a story about when I played at the Catalina Ballroom, which is a beautiful ballroom in the Catalina Island, that the caretaker said the lady was proud of you. She liked your music.
I looked at him with a puzzlement, and I said, lady? He said, yes, the ballroom, the lady. You know, and she's seen them all.
She's seen them all.
Tell us about the beautifully romantic story of how you met your lovely wife.
I met my wife playing a tour in Tokyo back in May of 1999. But more importantly, we reconnected a year later when I was invited to be part of a Frankie Manning celebration in May of 2000. And of course, Mitsumi met me, and she was a vintage, original vintage lover of clothing. She designs vintage clothing and has a very successful business online creating vintage clothing for women. So I introduced her to Frankie, and I remember Frankie jokingly said to me, Georgie, now he pulled me aside. He said, George, now I know you didn't travel 6,000 miles to the other side of the world just for me. And he winked and gave me that twinkle in his eye.
This is something you said almost 40 years ago when you were 21 years old. My favorite quote is a quote by Duke Ellington. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. The day this seems like a job to me is the day I hang up my baton. And so, from what you've just said, I'm very glad to hear that this still is such a passion for you. It's not a job, and we're going to have the pleasure of many, many years of George G. and his wonderful orchestra.
Yes. And like, a variation of Van Allen Sanders' tune, Let's Get Together, is Let's Swing Together. United we stand, divided we fall. I'd like to acknowledge that the Louis Armstrong Educational Foundation is a great organization supporting big band jazz and music all around the world in the name of Louis Armstrong, a great ambassador of jazz music, giving funding to musicians in need. There's a link on his website for the donations, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for all the pleasure you've given people for so many years. This is the portrait for this week, so it is a different portrait. It has a different atmosphere. And I will do, of course, a quick replay, so it's always interesting to see that on the back of this one, though, the star,
I like this, yes.
Because you talked about playing at the Apollo on that historic stage, which for you, your hero and mentor and friend, Count Basie, also played there, and many, many, many others. So I've put that in the background. That is part of your portrait for this week. You got a haircut there, look, see.
Mitsumi combed my hair. She's my stylist.
Thank you so much, George. This has been very, very special for me personally, getting to know your story much, much better and getting to know you much, much better. And I think everybody's really appreciated that. You really are an embodiment of Swing Makes You Happy. So what more can we say, right?
Thank you, Jeremy. I thank you, and I miss everybody so much, and I can't wait to see everybody again in real life. You know what I mean? Like, to be very honest, Jeremy, the next time can we do a part 3, but in real life, portrait conversation?
Let's do it. Oh,
okay.
It'll be, hey, watch out, George. It'll be a big portrait with lots of, it'll be like the one I did of Dawn Hampton at Harang, which I'll put a link
I'm going to
on.
hold you to it, for sure.
It'll be big and dramatic. You might get paint on you, though, so watch out, watch out. You might want to not wear your best suit for that one.
Well, yeah. I guess I'll put my hazmat suit to good use at that time, because hopefully we won't need it by then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So much good have come for me in my life, in the swing business and the big band business. Mitsumi, my son Glenn, all my friends, my health, my blessings, being part of this big band ensemble that I'm so proud of to be of. So much is good has come because of that, and I cherish it. I never take it for granted, and I plan, in the words of Basie, to keep the torch of the big band art form, this great American jazz art form, continuously. Unfortunately, at this moment, due to situations, we are unable to perform our big band jazz. But I can't wait to the time that we can get back together and swing some big band music for big band lovers and swing dance out again. And more importantly, Jeremy, I want to thank you for this opportunity to be part of this portrait conversation. I am very flattered and humbled to be able to tell a portion of my story. And I look forward to the time that maybe we can resurrect the Make Believe Ballroom and continue my memoir documentation. And especially in the political and cultural climate that we are immersed in at this moment, I pray that we will be out of it. And in the word, I like to say, tongue in cheek, but in all seriously, can't we all just swing along?
All right, folks, Don Hampton's favorite, Spunky. Once again, folks, with the George G. Swing Orchestra. Here we go.
This is from a show that we dedicated to Don at Midsummer Night's Swing a few years ago. So it's a very poignant way to end our program. And once again, to your audience out there, thank you. Hashtag Swing Makes You Happy. Peace out and keep on swinging.